You think your cooking is good enough without grandma's wisdom? Think again. Black grandmothers across the South perfected techniques that turned simple ingredients into legendary meals, passing down secrets that modern kitchens have nearly forgotten. Here are 30 old cooking tricks from black grandmas you'll wish you knew before. Seasoning cast iron with bacon grease was the foundation of every black grandmother's kitchen, transforming ordinary cookware into heirlooms passed through generations. After cooking bacon, Grandma poured the rendered fat into a tin can kept beside the stove, then used that precious grease to coat her skillets while still warm. She rubbed it in with a cloth, working the fat into every pore until it gleamed like black glass. This wasn't just maintenance, but kitchen alchemy, creating a non-stick surface superior to anything factory made. The bacon grease added flavor to everything cooked afterward, giving cornbread its golden crust and fried, and chicken its taste. Each use built upon the last, creating layers that told the story of countless family meals. Testing oil temperature with cornmeal was how black grandmothers knew their skillets were ready without thermometers or gadgets. A pinch of cornmeal dropped into hot oil told the whole story. If it sank and sat lifeless, the oil needed more time. If it sizzled immediately, dancing across the surface and turning golden within seconds, the temperature was perfect for frying. Grandma read that sizzle like a language, knowing exactly when to add battered chicken or catfish. This technique prevented soggy, grease-soaked food from oil that wasn't hot enough and saved dinner from burning when oil got too aggressive. The cornmeal test required no batteries, just wisdom passed from mother to daughter across generations, and it worked every single time. Soaking greens in salt water was non-negotiable, a step black grandmothers never skipped, regardless of time constraints. Collards, mustards, and turnip greens came from gardens carrying dirt, sand, and sometimes unwanted guests hiding in their leaves. Grandma filled her sink with cold water, added a generous handful of salt, and submerged those greens for at least 30 minutes. The salt drew out grit and convinced stubborn insects to abandon their hiding places. She lifted the greens out, drained the water, then repeated until it ran perfectly clear. This patience showed respect for the food and the people eating it. Serving gritty greens was a kitchen sin no self-respecting grandmother would commit, and this simple saltwater bath ensured clean, tender leaves every time. Adding vinegar to Potlikker was grandma's secret for greens that tasted brighter and more complex than anyone else's recipe. After collards or turnips simmered for hours with smoked meat, she added a splash of apple cider or white vinegar in the final minutes. This small addition cut through the richness of pork fat, balanced the mineral depth of the greens, and added subtle tang, making every bite more interesting. The vinegar also broke down tough fibers, ensuring greens were silky tender. That Potlikker, the precious broth left behind, became a tonic. Grandma insisted was good for colds and broken hearts alike. Families sopped it up with cornbread, drinking in vitamins and comfort. This simple trick elevated humble greens into something tasting like love. Tenderizing tough meat with cola was a Depression-era trick black grandmothers swore by when working with cheap, stubborn cuts that threatened to stay chewy. Grandma poured a bottle of cola over brisket, roast, or pork shoulder, letting it marinate overnight before slow cooking the next day. The phosphoric acid broke down tough muscle fibers while sugars caramelized during cooking, creating a glaze both sweet and savory. This technique turned budget cuts into meals tasting expensive, proving ingenuity could overcome limited grocery money. Families who couldn't afford prime beef still ate tender, flavorful meat because grandma understood cooking chemistry without formal education. The cola trick became legendary in black kitchens, whispered between neighbors, and shared at church gatherings. Keeping brown sugar soft with bread was kitchen wisdom that saved countless batches of cookies, cakes, and candied yams from disaster. Black grandmothers knew brown sugar turned into a rock-hard brick if left alone too long, making it impossible to measure. Her solution was elegantly simple. She placed a slice of fresh white bread directly in the sugar container and sealed it tight. Within a day or two, the sugar absorbed moisture from the bread, returning to its soft, scoopable state. The bread became stale, having sacrificed its moisture for the greater good. This trick meant Grandma always had workable brown sugar ready, never having to chip away at a solid mass. It was resourcefulness solving problems with what was already in the kitchen. Using coffee and gravy for depth separated ordinary cooks from grandmothers who understood flavor-building mysteries. After frying chicken or pork chops, Grandma deglazed her cast iron with leftover coffee from the morning pot, scraping up precious browned bits stuck to the bottom. The coffee added bitter, complexity-enhancing savory meat flavors without anyone identifying the secret ingredient. Mixed with flour and milk or broth, this became gravy tasting richer and more sophisticated than seemed possible from humble beginnings. Children begged for more, adults asked for the recipe, and Grandma smiled knowingly without revealing her trick. The coffee's roasted notes deepened the color and balanced sweetness, creating gravy worthy of Sunday dinner. Crisping chicken skin with baking powder was Grandma's answer to achieving shatteringly crisp fried chicken without a deep fryer. She patted chicken pieces completely dry, then dusted them lightly with baking powder mixed into seasoned flour before frying. The baking powder raised the pH of the skin, helping it brown faster and develop tiny bubbles, creating extra crunch. This technique meant skin stayed crispy even after sitting during a long family meal, never turning soggy. Grandma's chicken crackled when you bit into it, giving way to juicy meat beneath that golden armor. She learned this from her own mother, who discovered it through trial and error in a kitchen without modern conveniences. It remains a simple addition, making an enormous difference. Reviving stale bread with water and heat was how Black grandmothers refused to let anything go to waste in their kitchens. When a loaf had gone past its prime, dry and crumbly where it once was soft, Grandma ran it quickly under the faucet, getting the crust damp but not soaked through. She placed the moistened loaf directly in a hot oven for just a few minutes, watching carefully. Steam regenerated inside the bread, rehydrating starches that had gone hard and crusty. The result was bread tasting nearly fresh, with crisp crust and soft interior that seemed impossible given its previous state. This trick saved money and prevented waste, values Grandma held sacred after surviving times when food was never guaranteed. The revived bread made perfect toast or bread pudding. Stretching meat with oatmeal was how Black grandmothers fed large families when budgets were tight and mouths were many. When making meatloaf, meatballs, or hamburger patties, Grandma mixed oatmeal directly into ground beef, sometimes adding as much filler as meat. The oats absorb meat juices during cooking, staying moist and flavorful, while adding bulk-making portions go further. Children never noticed because texture blended seamlessly and oatmeal actually bound everything together better than breadcrumbs. This trick meant 1 pound of meat could feed twice as many people, a miracle born from necessity and perfected through practice. Grandma understood protein was expensive and creativity was free, combining both to keep her family nourished. Thickening stews with okra was a technique rooted in West African cooking traditions that Black grandmothers carried across generations. When gumbo or stew Needed body without flour or cornstarch, Grandma sliced fresh okra and added it to the simmering pot. As the okra cooked, it released natural mucilage that thickened the liquid into a silky, rich consistency. This wasn't just about texture, but about honoring culinary heritage stretching back centuries across the Atlantic. The okra added its own subtle flavor, earthy and green, complementing seafood, chicken, and sausage beautifully. Grandma knew exactly when to add it and how long to cook it, controlling thickness through timing alone. This ancient technique required just knowledge, passed through generations of cooks. Preventing curdled custard with cornstarch was Grandma's insurance policy against dessert disasters that could ruin Sunday dinner. Custards, puddings, and pie fillings made with eggs had a tendency to curdle if heat got too high or stirring stopped for even a moment. Grandma's solution was adding a small spoonful of cornstarch to the egg mixture before cooking, which stabilized the proteins and gave her more forgiveness at the stove. This meant she could focus on other dishes without panicking about her banana pudding separating into a grainy mess. The cornstarch created a smoother, silkier texture that held together even when reheated. Children never knew why Grandma's custard was always perfect while others failed, but this simple trick was the secret. It turned a temperamental technique into something reliable. Adding a potato to oversalted dishes was emergency rescue wisdom that saved countless pots of soup, stew, and greens from the trash can. When Grandma's hand slipped with the salt shaker or the smoked meat released more brine than expected, she didn't panic. She peeled a raw potato, cut it into chunks, and dropped it directly into the simmering pot. The potato absorbed excess salt as it cooked, pulling the seasoning out of the liquid and into its starchy flesh. After 20 minutes or so, she fished out the potato pieces and discarded them, leaving behind a dish that tasted balanced again. This trick worked because potatoes were always available and cheap, making them the perfect sacrifice for saving an expensive pot of food. It was practical magic that every grandmother seemed to know instinctively. Keeping cakes moist with mayonnaise was a secret ingredient that sounds strange until you understand the science Grandma knew by instinct. Mayonnaise is essentially eggs and oil already combined, the same ingredients that make cakes tender and rich. When Grandma added a few spoonfuls to her chocolate cake batter, the result was a crumb so moist it seemed impossible. The oil kept the cake from drying out even days after baking, while the eggs added structure and lift. This trick was especially valuable during times when butter was expensive or rationed, since mayonnaise was often easier to find. Children would devour slices without ever guessing the secret, and adults would beg for the recipe that Grandma guarded carefully. The mayonnaise cake became legendary at church bake sales, where it always sold out first. Using buttermilk to tenderize catfish was essential knowledge in Black Southern kitchens, where fish fries were community celebrations. Before dredging catfish in seasoned cornmeal, Grandma soaked fillets in buttermilk for at least an hour, sometimes overnight. The acid in buttermilk broke down proteins in the fish, making flesh more tender while removing any muddy taste river catfish sometimes carried. The buttermilk also helped cornmeal coating stick better, creating that perfect golden crust everyone loved. This technique transformed inexpensive pond-raised fish into something tasting like it came from a fancy restaurant. Grandma learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers, an unbroken chain of knowledge about making simple ingredients taste extraordinary. The buttermilk soak was non-negotiable for truly great fried catfish. Sweetening tomatoes with sugar was how Grandma coaxed the best flavor from canned tomatoes and out-of-season produce lacking natural sweetness. A pinch of sugar added to tomato sauce, stewed tomatoes, or soup balanced the acidity without making the dish taste sweet. This trick brought out the fruit's natural flavor, making cheap canned tomatoes taste almost as good as vine-ripened summer ones. Grandma added sugar to her spaghetti sauce, vegetable soup, and stewed tomatoes served over rice. She knew that acidity needed balance and that a little sweetness rounded out sharp edges. Children who turned up their noses at tomatoes would clean their plates when Grandma made them, never realizing her secret. This simple addition made economical cooking taste special, proving flavor didn't require expensive ingredients. Keeping pie crust flaky with lard was a technique that modern bakers have largely abandoned, but grandmothers understood as essential. Lard, rendered pork fat, created layers in pastry that butter simply couldn't match. When Grandma cut cold lard into flour, those fat pieces melted during baking, leaving behind air pockets that made crusts shatter at the touch of a fork. The flavor was neutral, letting fruit fillings and custards shine without competing tastes. Grandma kept a tin of lard in her refrigerator specifically for baking, treating it like the precious ingredient it was. Her pie crusts won ribbons at county fairs and earned requests at every church supper. She learned this from watching her own grandmother, who never considered using anything else. Lard crusts were the standard against which all others were measured. Adding molasses for deeper color was Grandma's trick for making baked beans, barbecue sauce, and gingerbread look as rich as they tasted. Molasses brought not just sweetness, but a dark, glossy appearance, signaling depth of flavor before the first bite. In baked beans, it created that mahogany color, saying the pot had simmered for hours. In barbecue sauce, it gave the caramelized darkness, making ribs look irresistible. Grandma added it to gingerbread and spice cakes for both flavor and that traditional deep brown color. The molasses also contributed minerals and slight bitterness that balanced sweetness, making dishes more complex. This ingredient connected her cooking to traditions stretching back generations, when molasses was cheaper and more common than refined sugar. Using it was both practical and rooted in cultural memory. Time equals 1 second. Using leftover pickle juice for brine was resourcefulness that transformed throwaway liquid into culinary gold. When the pickles were gone, Grandma never poured that brine down the drain. Instead, she used it to marinate chicken, adding tang and tenderizing the meat through its vinegar and salt content. Fried chicken, soaked in pickle juice, developed a subtle tanginess that people couldn't quite identify but absolutely loved. She also used it to quick pickle onions, hard-boiled eggs, or fresh vegetables from the garden. The spices already in the brine, dill, garlic, peppercorns, added complexity without any extra work. This trick stretched grocery budgets further while creating flavors that seemed to require much more effort. Grandma understood that good cooking meant wasting nothing and finding value where others saw only trash. Cooking rice in broth instead of water was how Grandma turned a plain side dish into something worth talking about. Whether using chicken broth saved from boiling a hen, beef broth from Sunday roast, or even the liquid from canned vegetables, she never cooked rice in plain water if she had an alternative. The rice absorbed all those flavors as it steamed, becoming savory and rich without any extra effort. This technique stretched a small amount of meat flavor across a whole pot of grain, making modest meals feel more abundant. Grandma's rice always tasted better than anyone else's, and this was her secret. She taught her daughters to save every flavorful liquid, knowing it could transform tomorrow's dinner. The broth-cooked rice was perfect under stews, beside fried chicken, or topped with gravy. Resting batter before frying was patience that separated good cooks from great ones in Black grandmothers' kitchens. After mixing pancake, cornbread, or fritter batter, Grandma let it sit for at least 15 minutes before cooking. This resting time allowed flour to fully hydrate and gluten to relax, resulting in lighter, more tender results. The baking powder also had time to begin its work, creating tiny bubbles throughout the mixture. Grandma used this waiting period to heat her skillet and prepare other parts of the meal. Rushed batter produced tough, dense pancakes, but rested batter yielded fluffy, golden circles that children remembered for decades. This wasn't laziness, but understanding that good food couldn't be hurried. The difference was noticeable in every bite, proving that sometimes the best ingredient was time. Adding a bay leaf to everything was Grandma's universal flavor enhancer that appeared in nearly every savory pot she touched. Beans, greens, soups, stews, rice, and braises all received at least one dried bay leaf floating on the surface as they simmered. The leaf released subtle herbal notes that deepened the overall flavor without being identifiable on its own. It added an earthy complexity that made simple dishes taste more sophisticated and carefully prepared. Grandma bought bay leaves in bulk and kept them in a jar near the stove, reaching for them almost automatically whenever she started cooking. She always removed them before serving, knowing that biting into a whole leaf was unpleasant. This small addition cost pennies, but transformed budget meals into something that tasted like it required much more effort and expense. Using rendered fat for frying was how Black grandmothers achieved flavors that vegetable oil could never match. After cooking bacon, ham, or chicken, Grandma carefully saved the drippings in jars or cans kept beside the stove. This liquid gold was used to fry eggs, saute vegetables, make gravy, and season cast iron skillets. Bacon fat added smokiness to everything it touched, while chicken fat brought richness to fried potatoes and cornbread. Nothing was wasted in Grandma's kitchen, and these fats represented both economy and flavor. She knew which fat worked best for each dish, choosing bacon drippings for greens and chicken fat for rice. Modern cooking has largely abandoned this practice, but those who remember understand why Grandma's food always tasted better. The rendered fat carried flavor memories from previous meals into new ones. Sprinkling flour on greasy skillets was Grandma's solution for turning pan drippings into gravy without any waste. After frying meat, she would sprinkle flour directly into the hot fat remaining in the skillet, stirring quickly to prevent lumps. The flour absorbed the grease and toasted slightly, creating a roux that formed the base of rich, flavorful gravy. She added milk or broth gradually, stirring constantly until the mixture thickened to the perfect consistency. This technique meant every bit of flavor left in the pan became part of the meal rather than being washed down the drain. Grandma's gravy was legendary because it contained all the essence of whatever meat had been cooked before. Children learned to watch and stir, understanding that this simple step elevated ordinary dinners into something memorable and satisfying. Chilling dough before rolling was the secret behind Grandma's impossibly flaky biscuits and pie crusts that seemed to shatter at the touch. After mixing her dough, she wrapped it tightly and placed it in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes before rolling. The cold firmed up the fat, whether butter or lard, keeping it in distinct pieces rather than melting into the flour. When baked, these cold fat pieces created steam pockets that became the flaky layers everyone loved. Warm dough spread and became tough, but chilled dough held its shape and texture beautifully. Grandma learned this trick from her own mother and passed it down with the same patience it required. This extra step meant starting earlier, but the results were worth every minute of waiting. Her biscuits rose tall and her pie crusts crumbled perfectly. Cooking low and slow for tender meat was the philosophy that guided Black grandmothers through tough cuts that would defeat impatient cooks. Oxtails, neck bones, short ribs, and pork shoulder all required hours of gentle simmering to transform from chewy to melt in your mouth tender. Grandma started these dishes early in the morning, letting them bubble quietly on the back burner while she handled other tasks. The collagen in these inexpensive cuts slowly converted to gelatin, creating rich, silky sauces that coated every bite. High heat would toughen the meat, but low temperatures and patience worked magic that money couldn't buy. This technique turned budget cuts into centerpiece dishes worthy of Sunday dinner. Grandma understood that time was an ingredient just as important as salt or pepper, and she used it generously. Using egg whites to clarify broth was how Grandma achieved crystal clear soups that looked as beautiful as they tasted. When making special occasion soups or aspics, she would add beaten egg whites to her simmering broth and stir gently. The proteins in the whites attracted and trapped the tiny particles that made broth cloudy, forming a raft on the surface that could be skimmed away. What remained was broth, so clear you could see straight to the bottom of the pot. This technique required patience and gentle heat, as boiling would break up the egg white raft and defeat the purpose. Grandma used clarified broth for wedding soups and holiday dishes where presentation mattered. It was a skill that impressed guests and demonstrated her mastery of techniques most home cooks never learn. Adding lemon to keep fruit fresh was Grandma's trick for preventing cut apples, pears, and bananas from turning brown before serving. A squeeze of lemon juice over fruit salad or sliced apples kept them looking bright and appetizing for hours. The citric acid slowed the oxidation process that caused browning, buying time between preparation and eating. Grandma used this technique when making fruit salads for church gatherings or preparing apple pie filling ahead of time. The lemon added a subtle brightness that enhanced the fruit's natural flavor rather than masking it. This simple trick meant she could prepare dishes in advance without sacrificing appearance, making entertaining less stressful. Children learned to associate the slight tartness with freshness, not realizing it was actually preservation in disguise. Storing herbs in damp paper towels was how Grandma kept parsley, cilantro, and green onions fresh for weeks instead of days. She wrapped the herbs loosely in dampened paper towels, then placed them in plastic bags with a little air inside before refrigerating. The moisture kept the leaves hydrated without making them soggy, while the bag protected them from the dry refrigerator air. This technique stretched grocery money further by preventing waste and ensuring fresh herbs were always available for cooking. Grandma checked the towels every few days, re-wetting them as needed to maintain the perfect humidity. Store-bought herbs that would normally wilt within a week stayed vibrant and usable for much longer. This was practical wisdom that saved money and ensured her dishes always had fresh flavor when they needed it most. Tasting as you go was perhaps Grandma's most important cooking trick, the one that made all others work together harmoniously. She never relied solely on recipes or measurements, but constantly sampled her cooking at every stage. A pinch more salt here, a splash more vinegar there, each adjustment made based on what her tongue told her. This continuous tasting allowed her to correct mistakes before they became disasters and to balance flavors perfectly for her family's preferences. Children watching learned that cooking was a conversation between the cook and the food, requiring attention and response. Grandma's dishes were never quite the same twice, but they were always delicious because she guided them with her palate. This skill couldn't be taught from a book, but only learned through practice and willingness to trust your own senses.
Ground acorn flour. Bread was a survival food born from foraging, using acorns gathered in the fall to make flour. Families would crack the nuts, leach them in water to remove bitterness, then grind them into meal. Mixed with cornmeal or wheat flour, the acorn flour became hearty loaves of bread with a nutty flavor. Though labor-intensive, it provided sustenance when store-bought flour was too costly or scarce. Children often joined in shelling acorns, their hands stained from the tannins, while adults handled the soaking and grinding. The bread itself was dense and filling, a reminder that the forest could feed families if they had the patience to prepare it. For many, it was a food of hard times, eaten more out of necessity than delight. Today, it is almost forgotten, except among foragers or survivalists. Yet ground acorn flour bread reflects the ingenuity of past generations who made the land itself their pantry. It was resilience baked into every loaf, proof that nothing was overlooked.
Adding vinegar to cooking greens was dismissed as peculiar taste preference, yet African American cooks insisted the splash of acid made vegetables more nutritious. Scientists now confirm that vinegar helps preserve vitamins during cooking, prevents color loss, and increases absorption of minerals like iron and calcium from leafy vegetables. Research shows that acidic environments protect certain nutrients from heat degradation while breaking down plant cell walls to release others. Grandmothers added their splash of apple cider or white vinegar toward the end of cooking, timing perfected through generations. The tang balanced the richness of smoked meat and cut through natural bitterness. What seemed like arbitrary seasoning was actually nutritional optimization that maximized what bodies could extract from every pot. The grease-saving ritual was sacred practice in Black kitchens where nothing went to waste. After frying, grandmothers let grease cool slightly, then strained it through cheesecloth into ceramic crocks kept beside the stove. This collected grease contained concentrated flavor from countless meals, bacon, chicken, fish, all mingling into liquid gold. The containers were never washed, only replenished, creating layers of seasoning that deepened over months. When cooking began, a spoonful of saved grease went into the skillet first, adding depth that fresh oil could never provide. Children understood this murky fat represented economy and flavor combined. The ritual continued daily without fanfare, simply part of kitchen rhythm. Modern cooks might cringe, but this technique delivered taste that made even simple vegetables memorable.
Hog crackling gravy was a trick to bring bold flavor to otherwise plain meals of rice, potatoes, or cornbread. Cracklings, the crispy bits left from rendering pork fat, were stirred into pan drippings and flour to make a rich, textured gravy. The salty crunch of the cracklings turned a simple starch into something hearty and satisfying. Families loved it because it stretched scraps into abundance, proving that nothing from the hog was wasted. It was often poured over large bowls of rice, transforming the cheapest ingredient into a meal fit for a feast. Children scooped it eagerly, not realizing they were eating thrift disguised as indulgence. The gravy carried the smoky, savory essence of pork, a taste that defined many kitchens of the South. Today, hog crackling gravy is nearly forgotten, replaced by smoother gravies with no trace of grit. Yet in its time, it embodied the art of survival cooking, where resourcefulness brought joy to the table. Hog crackling gravy was poverty made flavorful.
Cooking with cast iron skillets was standard practice in African American kitchens long before scientists discovered the pans actually fortified food with dietary iron. Research confirms that acidic foods like tomatoes and greens cooked in cast iron absorb significant amounts of the mineral, helping prevent anemia in communities with limited access to red meat. Those heavy black pans passed down through generations were doing double duty as cookware and nutritional supplements. Grandmothers seasoned their skillets with lard, building layers of natural non-stick coating that modern chemists struggle to replicate safely. What seemed like stubborn attachment to old equipment was actually health intervention disguised as tradition. Scientists now recommend cast iron cooking for the same benefits black cooks enjoyed for centuries. The cold pan stock for chicken defied conventional wisdom, but delivered perfect results every time. Black grandmothers placed seasoned chicken pieces into a cold cast iron skillet with solid shortening, then turned on the heat. As the pan warmed slowly, the fat rendered gradually, allowing the coating to set before the fierce sizzle began. This prevented flour from falling off and ensured the crust adhered perfectly. The chicken fried itself as temperature climbed, developing deep golden color without burning. Kitchens filled with gentle popping that grew louder as heat intensified. Children learned to judge doneness by ear as much as sight. This method required trust and patience with the slow build, but it produced crispier, more evenly cooked chicken than any hot start method could achieve.
Boiled peanut soup was a clever way to turn a cheap, plentiful snack into a rich and sustaining meal. Families started with boiled peanuts, soft and savory, then blended them with broth, onions, and sometimes milk to create a creamy soup. It was high in protein and carried a nutty depth that filled bellies when meat was scarce. African American kitchens especially valued peanuts, which had been part of food traditions since arriving from Africa. Children who were used to eating boiled peanuts from paper bags found it surprising to see them turned into soup, but the taste was comforting. For many, it was a dish of invention, born of necessity yet delicious enough to be remembered fondly. Peanut soup showed the creativity of cooks who could stretch a handful of legumes into a meal for an entire family. Though rarely seen today, it reflects the ingenuity of those who could not afford to waste anything. Boiled peanut soup was both survival and celebration, served warm with pride.
Using bacon grease as cooking fat was condemned for decades as unhealthy habit that would clog arteries. Yet African American cooks never stopped saving every precious drop. Modern research reveals that rendered pork fat contains less saturated fat than butter and provides stable cooking temperatures that prevent harmful compounds created when vegetable oils break down. Scientists discovered that animal fats contain fat-soluble vitamins processed oils lack entirely. Grandmothers kept ceramic crocks by the stove, straining bacon, drippings for seasoning vegetables and frying eggs. What nutritionists once banned as dangerous, researchers now acknowledge as traditional wisdom that understood fat quality matters more than fat avoidance. That humble grease jar held more intelligence than years of misguided dietary advice. Seasoning the skillet with bacon grease was ritual passed from mother to daughter in black kitchens throughout the 1950s South. After every use, grandmothers wiped their cast iron clean with a cloth, never soap, then rubbed warm bacon grease across the surface while the pan still held heat. This created a natural coating that deepened with every meal. The grease filled tiny pores in the iron, preventing rust and creating a glossy finish that announced years of careful tending. Children watched closely, understanding that a well-seasoned skillet was family treasure. Some pans had been seasoned for decades, their surfaces smoother than any modern coating. The grease added subtle depth to everything cooked afterward, meaning eggs carried traces of yesterday's breakfast. This technique transformed ordinary iron into heirloom vessels.
Wild persimmon bread carried the sweetness of the land itself, made from fruit gathered by hand in the fall. Families waited until the persimmons were soft and ripe, their astringency gone, then mashed the pulp into batter with flour, eggs, and spices. The bread baked into loaves that were dense, fragrant, and naturally sweet. Foraging for persimmons was a seasonal ritual, with children climbing trees and filling baskets under the autumn sun. The fruit was free, abundant, and full of vitamins, making it a precious resource when money for sugar or store-bought sweets was scarce. Wild persimmon bread tasted like the season, a warm reminder that even hard times could offer comfort. It often appeared on holiday tables, stretching humble ingredients into a dish that felt special. Today, it is nearly forgotten, overshadowed by modern quick breads like banana bread. Yet the memory of wild persimmon bread connects us to resourcefulness, tradition, and the joy of turning foraged fruit into nourishment. Each slice told the story of making the most of what nature gave.
Cooking collard greens for hours was dismissed as overcooking vegetables into mush, yet African American grandmothers knew something nutritionists took decades to confirm. The long, slow simmer breaks down tough cellulose fibers that human stomachs struggle to digest, releasing nutrients that quick-cooked greens keep locked away. Scientists now understand that extended cooking times make minerals like calcium and iron far more bioavailable. Families gathered around pots that simmered all Sunday morning, filling kitchens with that unmistakable aroma of greens seasoned with smoked meat. What seemed like patience born of tradition was actually sophisticated food science, practiced without laboratories. Those hours at the stove created meals that nourished in ways fast cooking never could. The bread test for oil temperature was how Black grandmothers knew exactly when their grease was ready without any thermometer. A small cube of stale bread dropped into hot fat told the whole story. If it sank and sat motionless, the oil needed more time. If it browned too quickly, the heat was too high. But when that bread cube floated immediately, sizzled steadily, and turned golden in about 60 seconds, the grease was perfect for frying. This technique had been passed down through generations who never owned thermometers. Grandmothers could also read oil by watching its surface shimmer and ripple. Children learned to recognize that particular sizzle sound that meant perfect temperature. The bread test was simple, reliable, and cost nothing. Proof that good cooking came from observation rather than equipment.
Slab bacon. Grease cookies were a sweet born out of thrift, when butter was scarce and nothing could be wasted. Families saved every drop of bacon grease in jars, using it not only for frying, but also for baking. When mixed into cookie dough with sugar, flour, and spices, the grease gave the cookies a unique smoky richness. They were soft, slightly salty, and filled with the taste of survival, proof that ingenuity could transform scraps into something special. Children often ate them warm from the oven, unaware they were built on frugality rather than luxury. These cookies carried the story of resilience, turning what others might discard into dessert. They were common in households where bacon was a rare indulgence, stretching its value far beyond breakfast. The smell of these cookies baking lingered in kitchens, a blend of sweet and savory unlike anything from store-bought treats. Today, they are nearly vanished, their memory tied to hard times. Slab bacon grease cookies show how even hardship can leave behind flavors worth remembering.
Drinking pot liquor from greens was a practice that made outsiders cringe, yet African American families treasured every drop of that dark, rich cooking liquid. Modern nutrition research confirms what grandmothers always knew, that broth contains concentrated vitamins and minerals that leach from the greens during cooking. Scientists discovered pot liquor holds more nutritional value than the vegetables themselves, packed with water-soluble vitamins B and C. Families would sip it warm from cups or soak cornbread until it softened into a nourishing meal. During lean times, this liquid gold stretched resources while delivering essential nutrition. What doctors now call nutrient-dense broth, Black families simply called Potlikker, and they never wasted a single precious drop. The splatter shield with pot lids was practical protection Black grandmothers used against hot grease burns while monitoring their frying food. Oh, a lid held at an angle over the skillet deflected spitting oil away from hands and arms while allowing steam to escape and letting cooks watch browning progress. This technique required skill. Holding the lid too close trapped steam and made food soggy, while holding it too far offered little protection. Grandmothers developed steady hands from years of practice, able to flip chicken one-handed while the other held the shield. Children were warned repeatedly about grease burns and taught this defensive technique before being allowed near the stove. The pot lid method also caught grease vapor, keeping kitchen walls cleaner. Every kitchen already had one. Which of Grandma's cooking tricks will you try first? Drop it in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more kitchen wisdom from the past.